Hello and welcome to IMHO. Today I'm talking to Kevin Indig about his research on AIO. Kevin is possibly the current authority on search commentary in the industry. For anyone that doesn't know who Kevin is, he's ex-Atlassian and Shopify, and he's now an independent growth advisor for clients such as Reddit, Dropbox, Upwork, and many others. Kevin has been working recently on a usability research study, along with sponsored partners DoFollow and Zofu, about how users interact with AIO. So there's a lot to talk about here. Your research has been looking at things like the click-through behavior when AIO is present, how users actually read AIO content, how people react to SERPs emotionally, what influences how users choose their answer, how demographics impact search behavior. So just to kick off, Kevin, can you please tell me about your methodology and tell me about the setup of the study?
Yeah, I'm super excited about this because this is the first ever usability study on how, as you said, Google users interact with Google AI overviews. So I've spent a lot of time looking at many data points, aggregated quantitative data. And this is the first usability study where we looked at 70 participants out of the US across all different age ranges and across mobile and desktop. And we tracked not just their scroll behavior, click behavior, dwell behavior. We also had them annotate their thoughts and tracked their emotions, right? So if they're hesitant, for example, if they're skeptical, maybe even if they're nervous, we're able to capture all of this. So the way that we approached this was we gave those 70 participants 8 different tasks to capture a wide range of user intents. So they would look for a local service agency, for example. They would look to buy some products online. They would look for medical information, for finance information. So we really wanted to tap into all the most prominent intents that are out there. And that led to over 300 task sessions and 400 interactions with AI overviews alone. We also looked at how do they interact with things like Reddit and YouTube, and how do they interact with organic search results. So there's a lot in there. It's a small sample size, but all these usability studies have small sample sizes, but the qualitative insights there, they're absolutely fascinating. And I don't have limited time, but you could have me talk about this for 5 hours if I wanted to.
So, Kevin, let's really get into the meat of it and let's get to the bottom line. What have you actually found out about the impact of AIO on clicks? That's really what everybody wants to know, right?
Yeah, sure. Everybody wants to know, and I get it. I'm working with many companies that are seeing massive drops in clicks, and often increases in impressions. So 2025 is really the year where everybody feels it. Last year was kind of the year where people were concerned, but didn't really feel that much in the numbers. 25 is very different. I'll go so far as to say I think 2024 will be remembered as peak traffic year. But anyway, what we notice is that AI overviews significantly reduce clicks. So we saw a 50% click reduction on desktop and a 30% click reduction in mobile. So obviously very severe, but there's a lot of nuance to this as well. So nuance in the sense that we saw many participants actually validating the answers in the AI overview. So, for example, especially in the medical space and the finance space, right? These industries that we know as YMYL, your money or your life, that's where people come with a high bar of skepticism to begin with. And even if the AIO answers their question precisely and accurately, they'll still click through to other sites to make sure that that answer is correct, right? So even though click through rates are dropping severely, there's still a behavior in there that is secondary where people want to validate their clicks. What we've seen, what's interesting is that younger audiences validate much more with Reddit, which could be one of the explanations for why Google highlights Reddit so prominently for all sorts of queries. Is that especially young people, they see the AI answer, they want to get an answer from a human on Reddit. And then older demographics will still click on many blue links, and especially the authoritative sites that they know. So, yes, there's a click reduction, and there's a lot of nuance around how high the stakes are for a query that will then lead to users still clicking through to other blue links, instead of just stopping at the AIO answer.
How are users interacting with the AIO panel? I mean, is that different in any way from how perhaps users were interacting originally when featured snippets came out?
It is, it is. Um, and I love that you draw that comparison because I think there are a lot of assumptions that, oh, AIOs are just featured snippets on steroids. And it's not that far off either, but what's interesting is that I actually see a similarity in the data between how users scanned AI overviews and how they scanned the classic search results. So similar to classic search results, Google users spent the majority of their time at the top of the AIO. And the times where they would scroll, even 75%, they're relatively low. So the majority of attention is at the top, which means in return for you that if you want to be visible in the AIO, which I strongly suggest, you need to aim for a mention or citation as high up as possible, which in return means that if you try to optimize your content for an AIO, you want to look specifically at the first couple of chunks rather than the last ones, right? So there is that natural prioritization. And then again, there still is that kind of trust factor that comes in. So users expect especially trustworthy, authoritative domains higher up at the top, which in return means that if Google hasn't already, I assume that they will this whole kind of trust or authoritativeness factor will be an even stronger influence when it comes to the visibility in the air or higher at the top. And then the further down you are, the more secondary the information and probably the less authoritative the sources are.
You touched on something quite interesting there. You said again about the trust, and I know you mentioned that before that in the study you were particularly looking at emotion, not just usability, but also emotion. Um, in what did you find anything interesting about the ways that users reacting with your study, particularly with trust?
Yeah. So this is where these findings have really shaped my understanding of search fundamentally. And so I would say up until this point, the common conception or mental model about search is that people mostly scan for relevance. So they have a question or user intent and they scan the search results and all the search features by basically the question, is this relevant? Does this answer my question? Is this the most interesting answer to my question? And now in this study, we've observed that the number one filter that users actually apply to all the results, whether they're AIOs or classic blue links or search features, is trust. Do I trust the source of this information? They would scan the domain or the brand that is mentioned in the context of an answer or in a snippet. And they will first of all ask themselves, do I trust this, that this is the right, trustworthy, and authoritative source? And then they apply the relevance filter. So, in other words, if you are not known to the user as a trustworthy domain, you're barely, probably invisible in the search results, no matter where you are. And on the other hand, if you are in that set of trustworthy sources, then the relevance filter kicks in. Then people wonder, okay, does that exactly answer my question? They will look at, does this maybe reflect my question verbatim? Do I see interesting pointers as to how well it does answer my question? For example, is there an indication that there's, I don't know, like a underlying data set or maybe some firsthand expertise or experience, right? So all these factors that impact the choice set of users before they even perform a search are now becoming so much more important. And so as a brand, you want to figure out, okay, how can I position myself in the minds of users before they even search to be visible when they do?
How are you seeing the any differences between demographics, particularly on, the way they're responding and trusting of AIO?
Yeah. To your point, older demographics don't trust the AIO at all. Similar to
Okay.
featured snippet, but they will very often skip it and they will go back to their classic blue links.
Oh,
We've also
really?
found, yeah, which is quite fascinating, right? Because it means
Yeah.
that we're so adamant about putting user intent first in SEO, and that's right. And I think in this new world, we also need to be highly aware of the demographic that we're targeting. And interestingly, um, older demographics are also much more likely to engage with search features like local packs than younger demographics. That was also interesting for me. That must have been the case for a while now, not just in this new AIO world. And they still show kind of this kind of trust filter, right? So that's universal across all demographics, but older demographics tend more to click on the blue links. Younger demographics much more on featured snippets in AI overviews and Reddit as well. And that's kind of ironic because Reddit is a classic Web 2.0 forum, and yet it is younger people who engage with it, not people who were, um, online during the peak times of forums back then. But yeah, that's what we're seeing in the data.
I mean, how are these groups interacting with AIO? So you're saying that they are clicking quite a lot on Reddit. Is there anything else specifically that you're pulling out of your study that they're clicking on?
Yes. So what's interesting is, as I mentioned, so younger demographics are more likely to click on Reddit, but also YouTube. And so um, obviously there's a differentiation here by user intent. Certain queries, especially those related to how to, that's where people they expect a video, right? That's why probably we're seeing more videos in AIOs as well. They're related to how to's because then Google understands that younger demographics have that expectation. And then again, we already talked about YouTube and Reddit as well. Um, they also are obviously much more likely to be on mobile, right? So we're lucky to track or compare both mobile versus desktop. And the interesting part here is that mobile users obviously interact slightly different with AIOs than desktop users, as so far that they're generally more likely to scroll throughout the AI overview to get a better sense and perception of all the different sources and answers that are mentioned there.
So, sorry,
And
Kevin, just to clarify, you said
sure.
that was on mobile that
Yeah.
people are more likely to scroll on AIO.
Correct. Yes, it's on
Yeah.
mobile because they have a smaller screen surface or screen real estate, and so they're trying to get a better perception of all the elements of the AIO. And what we've also found is that across any demographic, the more time you spend on the AIO, the more likely you are to trust it. We found a medium correlation, which at this scale, right, is actually quite interesting. That just doesn't stick out for no reason. But we found that the more people engage with the AIO, the more likely they are to trust it. And so if you were to spin that further a little bit, now with AI modes coming out, that wasn't part of the study, right? We conducted the study in March and April. Before AI modes came out of labs, or at least for out of the waitlist. But the question then is, of course, as AI modes might keep users in the AI answer for longer, is that another way for Google to foster more trust to the AIO answers? And then at the same time make more clicks on blue links redundant. So that is speculation for me. Again, that was not part of the study, but we found that correlation between trust and dwell time in the AIO.
Did you actually find that users were clicking on sources? Did you measure that at all?
They click on sources. Generally, more when it comes to higher stake queries, right? So
Yeah,
in health and finance, people are 3 times as likely to click on a source because their hesitation is so much higher, right? And their skepticism is so much higher. Whereas, if you're looking for a coupon code or if you're looking to buy a product,
yeah.
you rarely click on sources. Same with information gathering. High stakes queries in health, people click on sources and they choose specifically authoritative sources, right? So government organizations, or like maybe sites like Mayo Clinic, right, that they have heard of and seen many, many times. So that's their preferential set of choices. Whereas if it comes to very basic information, like which month is the best month to buy a car, there's just not a lot of source clicking going on. So generally, the number of clicks on sources and citations in AIOs is much, 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 much lower than when AIOs are not showing up and you only have blue links or blue links plus SERP features. So I want to be clear that the detrimental impact on click-throughs is still very strong, even though users validate the AIO answer with source clicks.
It's quite interesting. It's in a way, it's almost like users are actually checking out the validity of the answers. Like you say, they're just checking out to see have they got it right or not. So they're testing it, aren't they? which is kind of quite interesting that users are reacting in that way to a degree. I'm hearing mixed reviews from people. Some people are saying that, they're really trusting of the summaries and find them massively useful, whereas, other people not so much. I mean, for you personally, how are you interacting with AIOs, summaries, etc.? How do you find them?
Yeah, it's funny you asked that because I see myself and my behavior very much in the data. When I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, wait, that's how I use it too. But I mean, I'm a small sample size, and it you don't want to like draw conclusions from your own behavior on the broader population. But I think it very much is in line with how I use it. I validate as much as well. And I mean, look, I don't think this is completely new behavior. I think I learned this in school. You always want to double check your sources. You always want to validate claims, right? But I will also say, and this came out in the data, that even when you try to apply high intellectual rigor to the sources you consume and double check and all that kind of stuff, the AIO still influences your choice set. Meaning, if the AIO mentions specific brands, you cannot unsee that. You cannot forget that. It still
Yeah.
has an impact on your behavior. And so even though we're seeing those validation habits showing up as a brand has an impact. It has a meaning. It's not meaningless. And so, sure, I also double check my sources when I interact with LMs like ChatGPT and Claude and whatnot, right? You always want to do that. However, once you've seen it, it's kind of there. And so, I think why that's important is because it means that there is value in being present in the AI overview. We're not able to quantify that yet. Like how valuable is it? How much does it impact conversions? But just because clicks are going away to a large part doesn't mean there's no meaning in showing up there, right? And so we still have to define kind of our set of metrics that we're looking at to kind of evaluate performance and wins and all that kind of stuff. But there is something to impressions. There is something to being there and
Mhm.
influencing users along the way, even if it's not on your own website.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes back to it's classic marketing. Was it six touches that people needed to see before that they really bought into a brand? It's just classic psychology, isn't it? I think what's also really interesting, what I was thinking then while you were talking was um, that old classic trick of having the double when it was just 10 blue links and then paid search, and you would go for the double of having the number one ranking and the ad space as well, so that people would, when users came to the SERP, they would see the double reference to again, with the view of giving more brand validation. It's just that it's all cycles repeated, isn't it? Quite fascinating, really.
It is fascinating. And it's also fascinating because, SEO is often seen as a performance channel. I think that's
Mm.
changing where it's becoming more of a brand channel and that comes with pros and cons. But you're absolutely right. It's about touch points, reach, being visible, and trust, right? So I think that is important to kind of tease out because this is maybe not completely new, but for the last couple of years, this has kind of been coming, right? This idea that do I trust this brand? How do they sell and position themselves for trust? Because you can position and sell yourselves for price or for availability or for other things. But seeing this data, me as a marketer, it changes my approach in a sense that the first question I'm asking myself for positioning, messaging, the channels that I choose, the copy that I write, it's all about how can I convey trust and kind of solidify that perception in my user's mind that I'm trustworthy, as opposed to I'm the cheapest, I'm the fastest, or something else. It's all about trust.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin, you're a growth advisor to some real huge companies, blue chip brands. So, with all this information, what will you be saying to them in your recommendations, in your consulting? What are your kind of top recommendations for moving forward with this information?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. So here's kind of my set of things that work and that are important. First of all, um, you want to optimize for AI overviews, and you you want to be very precise, right? I think one thing that's important to understand in how AI changes, everything, but especially also user behavior, is that people are able to express their intents in much more detail and clarity, right? They're asking longer questions, and so in return, you might be able to be visible with much more targeted content, right? Google trained us to keep queries short because that's where the best results were. AI is the opposite. It says, okay, your prompts can be 30 words or longer, which is, by the way, the average on ChatGPT. Um, and so therefore, optimize for AI overviews with hyper-targeted content. Be very, very specific in users' needs, the personas, who they are, where they are, and what the right product for them is. Two, you want to monitor AI overviews and then look at the most relevant chunks that you have content for. So if you're asking a question like, what's the best month to buy a car? The AI overview typically has different chunks. So it might have an exact answer, like, oh, the best month is May, and then might have some pros and cons. Oh, May versus September, blah blah blah. Right? These are the pros and cons buying those months. And then maybe at the end there is a video or something like that. Right? These are three different chunks, and you want to see what content do I have that could match one of these chunks, and then optimize it in a classic featured snippet way where you look at the answer, you try to give a better, more concise answer. There's a minimum requirement of rank in organic search, typically top 20 positions, but that's kind of the common approach to optimizing for answers. But again, don't forget the long tail. I think that's where a lot of the magic is. Three, influence users before they even have a search need, right? So a lot of advertising, great content, data stories, PR, brand collaborations, messaging, positioning, all of that becomes relevant now. Four, invest in YouTube and Reddit. That's where people go either when they have a very strong how-to need or when they want to validate some of the answers that I see in AI overviews. And then five is make your content easy to skim and navigate. What I've seen is that 86% of users skim a lot, meaning on the search results or on the websites that they click through to, they will scroll, they will look for key information, they will look for bullet passages, headings, table of contents, key takeaways, FAQs. And so all these are ways to get to shorten the time to answer for users, and you want to approach content creation in exactly that style.
Yeah, I think everybody's very time poor these days, aren't they? So it's all about the pulling out the snippets of information, which is actually exactly why I started IMHO to have a nice little contracted, coffee-sized break of information from their favorite SEOs. So on that point, Kevin, obviously drawing to a close now, it's been fantastic to speak to you. Your research is fascinating. I believe that you are launching your research today. Is that right?
That's right.
And
Yes.
so where is this going to be through your growth memo newsletter?
Yes, that's right. If you go to
Yeah.
growth-memo.com, you find it very prominently right at the top.
Yeah, and for anybody who hasn't signed up for Kevin's newsletter, do now. It is one of the best sources of information. It's fantastic. And also, Kevin, again, do you want to just give a quick reference to the two companies that helped you produce this data?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking, Shelley, because this was like a very solid five-figure effort investment. Many people involved, right? This was a lot of work, 10 weeks. And so big shout out and thank you to dofollow.com and sofu.com for making this happen and believing that this could be valuable without seeing where it's going to go in the beginning.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time, Kevin. I've been wanting to speak to you for a long time, so it's great to have you on the show. And thank you very much.
Likewise, thanks so much for having me.